So part two in the prayer project, part one was introducing the themes in middle school, how I introduce it. In part two, we're going to talk about how the project works. Um, it's at first it's difficult and it's digging and digging and then getting into the depth of it, and that takes time. And what we're doing is we're slowing down. Middle schoolers are so distracted, they have so many different activities, classes, homework, and they're stressed out. So this is very low key. It's almost no technology. People are like, what? So we're slowing down from many things to go to one thing. So I'll give you the background and the history of the project, grade by grade how it works, and then something of the final essays. And then we'll move on to talk about the entire presentation on contemplative prayer to introduce teachers and students. And finally, what the students say at the end of the year and in their essays. We'll get a bit of a feel for that. So, St. Teresa's Avila, we're going to talk about St. Teresa of Avila's 4 ways of watering a garden a little later. We talked about slowing it down, that students are scattered, that technology, at first, it's supposed to make life easier, but it becomes a burden for us. So we got to get from the boundaries back to the center, and the center is Christ. So in this class with the prayer projects, in the importance of spiritual life, we're serious about prayer. We're very deep on ideas and the Trinity and mysteries, but we're very light on homework. People notice in my class all the time that I don't assign much homework at all. But in class, I need you to be very serious about theology and really getting things done. So for 3 years at St. Mary McCormick Academy in Port Huron, Michigan, I taught this for grades 6 to 8. And at first people resist, hey, why can you do this? And I could just point to the mission statement that we have a spiritual responsibility to the students or whatever, that even though this isn't in your book, we are still going to do it. And we got to get away from the idea of giving God just 1 hour per week at Mass. That's not enough. We're giving God more than that. You really need administrative support to help creative teaching. Luckily, I had it when I was teaching there for 3 years. And parents who encourage are good, and showing students that we care about them as persons, because that's ultimately what prayer is about. It's not just a grade. So in 6th grade, I introduced prayer in the 3rd quarter. They're required to pray consistently for 3 weeks, just 4 days every other day at 5 minutes, so 20 minutes a week. And it must be 3 weeks in a row, or it gets reset to 0 if they missed it. So it's getting students to just understand the responsibility of prayer and what's coming in 7th and 8th grade, and a correctly formatted email to me. The grade is simple. If this gets completed in the 3rd quarter, they get 500 points. And if they do it in the 4th quarter, they only get 400 points. But notice, there are exceptions for illnesses and other extraordinary circumstances, but notice that this isn't about how well you're praying. It's simply about, if you do this, you get these points. And you need to emphasize that clearly to the students, that it's not about students competing against each other and who's better at prayer. And so notice I have 500 points, 400 points. I was kind of known for having very large, weird point amounts. And so if you want to take that to 100 points, that's fine. But students tend to think it's funny that sometimes I'll have a test for like 800 points. Okay. So in 7th and 8th grade, prayer is introduced in week 1. It's the same presentation, but more details. It lasts almost all year. Students get extra credit for praying during Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter breaks. Because obviously if you're out of school, you want to be detached from school, but prayer is more than just school. And so you want to give it to the kids open without forcing them to pray and get extra credit, especially maybe if they lost points earlier. The session range goes from 5 to 20 minutes and a few times untimed. The weekly range is 20 to 90 minutes, and the total for the year is about 30 or 40 hours for 7th and 8th graders. Emails are weekly or session to session depending on student. Grades never based on spiritual progress. Again, it's about based on what you're doing and getting back feedback promptly. Groups are introduced in the 3rd quarter based on student needs, and these are SERGL. These won't be covered here, but it's after half the year. I see where they're going. I give them a group based on what they need, and I give them a form that explains why they're in that group, what it is, what their goal is. Grades. You get weekly or bi-weekly grades in semester 1, and there's one large grade in semester 2 that fluctuates, and students always know where they stand. And so that one large grade might be 1,500 points, and if they mess something up, it might drop to 1,350, and then if they recover, it might go back up. So it's just one large thing that's part of the grade the entire quarter. In seventh and eighth grade, I have one-on-one meetings with the students. I'll give them something to do that doesn't require my presence, and at the same time, I'll call each student back and we'll talk really quickly a few times a week. Um, the teacher goals, you want to give fast responses to your students. You want to encourage them all and set high standards and be honest and straightforward. But teachers should also be immersed in contemplative prayer themselves, or they won't know how to guide the students. At the end of the year, seventh graders give me a 400 to 500 word letter to their eighth grade selves, and they get that back the next year. Eighth grade, they give me an 800 to 1,000 word final essay on their individual prayer journeys, and that's where most of the quotations for the student, when we hear from the students in part 4, will come from there. Final essays. They're student to student, meaning like the eighth graders will write an essay that's almost geared to where someone else might read that in the future, and so it's not aimed at me. Tentative grades are given with each draft, and they give me their best and stretch their literary expression and try to maybe use metaphors, poetry stuff. There's certain well, that's okay for right now. I use pseudonyms for the names, so if someone's name is Bob, it might be Timothy, but male and female are preserved. The seventh graders sometimes read these essays if I feel they need them in another year, like one at a time. And eighth graders do a homework study with 4 essays of essays from previous years, and there are good surprises in there. And so this concludes the second part of the presentation.